Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike Phillips, and I will be your host. This is the Leadership Toolkit, as we say every week, the definitive leadership podcast for the opportunity for you to listen and learn from amazing leaders from different facets of business from all over the world. Today is certainly no exception. We're going to learn from successes. We'll learn from failures. I am super excited to have an amazing guest with me. He is a 30-year automotive veteran. He's seen ups and downs in the automotive industry. He's been a managing partner. He's an amazing leader. He's an amazing team builder. He's an innovator. He's built businesses from the ground up. And I am excited to introduce to you today, Mr. Jonathan Lampros. Jonathan, welcome to the show today, man.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So if you would, as we're getting going here, and I know a little bit of your background, we've talked a little bit, I'm familiar with you. Ironically, as we were talking, I said, man, we're right in the same area.
Yeah.
We could have gotten together for the show, but we're far enough away that here we are online. So thanks for joining me. If you would take just a few minutes, and if you would share with the audience kind of who you are, what your background is, the 3-minute elevator pitch of Jonathan Lampros and your leadership background and such, that'd be awesome.
You bet. Yeah, so I moved to Colorado in 1996 from Omaha, Nebraska. And I came out here, stuffed everything in my car, was hoping to go up to UNC and wrestle. And I was living with my brother and my car broke down. So I had to find a job that I could walk to. And there happened to be a dealership that was just around the corner. So I detailed cars through high school. And I thought I could go in there and be, on the detail team. And so I came in a shirt and tie because I was always taught that's how you dress. And I sat down, I filled out the application. They said, wait. And I waited for 6.5 hours for a gentleman to come out and talk to me. And he was Brian Schreiber. I'll never forget. He said, wow, we can't believe you're still here, kid. You ever thought about selling cars? I said, no, sir. I said, pay you $1,500 a month guaranteed for the first 2 months. Yes, sir. And 2 months later, I was their top salesperson. 2 years later, I was a manager. And then by the time I was 25, I was a GSM. By the time I was 33, I was a GM, and then made a managing partner with actually Mr. John Elway. We started John Elway Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram up in Greeley. Sold that to Asbury, and then did another one, and sold that one to AutoNation. So it's been quite the ride. And in that meanwhile, married my high school sweetheart. I've been with her since for 31 years now, and literally 5 children later, and 31 years of blissful, of course, marriage, right?
Always.
As she survived, the auto industry, as difficult as it is. I stepped back and started consulting back in September. She's like, you've got one more child left. You might want to be a little bit more part of her life. And kind of like you, as with your daughter in gymnastics, my daughter's in competitive soccer. And so we travel around quite a bit. So I feel like I'm on vacation every day now. It's crazy. After 6 days a week, 15-hour days for literally, 30 years. It's been quite the ride, but yeah, it's even more fun now, I believe. So yeah, that's the quick, the short of me then.
No, I think that's awesome. I mean, you've got such a colorful background and so much I know to share with people that are here. When what can you share with us, like thinking back, because you said, I think it's so interesting that you're saying, hey, I sat there for 6 hours. The guy comes out and says, hey man, you're still here. Have you thought about selling cars? What would you say you learned from just that first experience? If you're thinking back right now and you're saying, okay, this is how I got into the car business. I thought I was going to do one thing and this guy offered me the opportunity. Where would you say that put you, and what did you learn from that first experience?
Well, I would tell you that that really stuck with me. As you can tell, I remember it like it was yesterday. And I had, as wrestlers, we are just, I wrestled for since I was a little, like 4 years old. So I was the littlest in my family, and my dad put me in wrestling because he said, we better make you tough. So we learned really quick at a young age that you stick with things, right? You have to grit it out. And so when somebody said, hey, wait, I waited, and I'll never forget that. I don't want to say it was patience, because I don't really believe I'm really good at patience, probably one of my weaknesses, but I do believe that I do have an insane amount of grit and desire to accomplish something. So if there's a small goal or a large goal, it didn't matter. We were going to get it done one way or another. And I really do believe that came from all those years on a wrestling mat.
I love that, man. I love when I hear people talk about grit. I remember my oldest son going through high school, and that was one of the big things they talked about on the high school football team is you got to have grit. Do me a favor, because I think people have different definitions of things, right? We have different definitions of leadership. Sometimes we have different definitions of what it is to be successful. I was talking with a group of guys last week that said, hey, what does it mean to be successful and so forth? And you'll get different definitions. When you're talking about, hey, you got to have that grit and you have to be willing to stay with it. How do you define grit, or is that it in a nutshell?
No, well, it's kind of like that pit bull. When you lock your jaws on something, you don't let go. But I really think it's important that you lock into something that you're passionate about, right? That you have a desire to actually do. And then you have to understand that the passion comes and goes. I'm not a believer in motivation. I'm a firm believer in discipline. So I believe if you have grit, that you are disciplined to a T, that you make sure that you just lock in and you don't let go. And there's going to be probably more bad times than there are good times. But I really am a firm believer. That you've got to have the bad for the good, and that when you decide that this is what you're going to do, you do it. And it doesn't matter. Like I said, I started in '96. I saw the '01 bust in the car business. I saw when gas went to $4 a gallon and
Oh
everybody
yeah.
got rid of their SUVs and got back to the cars. I went through 2008. I actually was in Greeley when, oil was great, and then oil dropped to the bottom, and was like they were giving it away during
Yep.
I think it was up
I
2015
remember
with the
that. Remember
fracking.
2008? I'm sorry to interrupt you here. You're on
Yeah,
a roll. You remember 2008? They did the cash for clunkers, and you had to
yeah,
pour the stuff in the engine to deaden the engine. You had to
and
prove that
ruin
the
those
car was.
cars. Yeah,
I know. Gosh,
felt
that's
like we were
wild.
killing them, didn't it? Like we were literally putting them out of their misery. It's like, oh man,
Oh man,
that
good
was
times.
quite the time. Yeah,
So
that's
I love this already right away. We got Austin Props and Team Lampros. He's my mentor and coach, legit human wealth and knowledge. So stay tuned, folks. And hey, while I'm saying that and putting stuff on the screen, so I don't forget, I always we'll go through the whole show and I get jamming and talking leadership with people. For anybody that wants to connect, if you're watching live now, or if you tune in on the podcast, one thing that I think is so awesome, I love when I'm interviewing people and they're like, look, you could just give my cell phone number, because I think that's really, really powerful. Like that's an actual genuine connection piece with humans. So Jonathan, when we were talking beforehand, he said, look, you can give my cell out. If you hear something that's beneficial to you, you want to be able to connect and be part of Team Lampros. Now you're officially dubbed there. You can contact Jonathan via text. I'd recommend texting first. Don't just randomly call, but 303-995-0421. And so you can connect with him. He's also on LinkedIn. He said, look, I'm the only Jonathan Lampros there. And so if you search for him, I have the link up on the screen, but it's just looking for Jonathan Lampros. Lampros is Lampros. So for anybody that wants to check that out, give you a quick plug early, because we when I get into this, here's the next question I got for you. You commented, you said, I don't believe in motivation. I believe in discipline. Why do you not believe in motivation?
Because it's fleeting. Years of having sales meetings every morning. It was my job as the manager, even as the GM. It didn't matter. That was one of my favorite things of the day, to have that sales meeting. Boy, I could get everybody pumped up and riled up, and out they would go out on the lot, and then about an hour later, that was all gone.
Sure.
And so it took discipline, right? It took discipline
Sure.
to stick to the things that I call them MTMs, metrics that matter. In this day and age, when we have all the data and all the information, I do believe I operate in two worlds. I operate off my gut, my instinct, but I also operate in the actual data. I loved cultivating all that data. But when we got to the point where we had so much data that it was overkill. So what I did was I defined the things that mattered most, and I called those the MTMs, the metrics that matter. And then we would focus in just in deep level on making sure that we accomplished the things that gave us the results that we came to work to do. And that takes discipline. That really does. Because like I said, that motivation is only going to last so long. And then somebody knows is going to start to wear you down. Maybe not getting in front of somebody's going to wear you down. Picking up the phone and making 100 phone calls is going to wear you down. There's lots of things. A hot day, you know how that goes. You're out on the blacktop, and it's 100 degrees outside and 120 on the blacktop, and so there's a lot of things that start to beat people down. Boy, moving snow, just like the other day, I love driving past car lots and there's snow all over their cars, and I just go, man, we beat everybody. All my guys would be out there moving the snow, moving the cars. We'd have it all. I mean, but that was a lot of work, and that was a lot of grinding. And so then now all of a sudden it's time to turn around and sell. and put your best foot forward. Well, that takes discipline. Motivation's not going to get you there, right? There's no amount of motivation that's going to carry you through an entire day, an entire week, an entire month. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I love it. I've always likened like motivation is the espresso shot, right?
Yeah,
It could get you started, but passion is the fuel. Like passion's got to keep you. You have to know what you're passionate about to be able to chase something. And man, I think you hit it right on the head when you're talking about discipline, because there are times you got to do stuff. I love the snow on the car lot example. Like that's something that is so necessary. Yeah, it's so necessary, because then it shows the public that you're open. And I do think on some level, like motion helps to create that emotion and help get you moving and help keep you going throughout the day. We got a couple comments on here. I love Matthew Lilly says, discipline equals freedom. Motivation means you're ruled by emotion. I think that's a really strong statement.
Yep, that's exactly it. And again, emotions, right? They go up and down, and so does your motivation, and it kind of fleeting with that. Like, I mean, our emotions can change by the second, right? And
sure.
So if we're really subject to that, then your motivation is going to be subject to it. And so I'm sorry, in the sales world and the world that we're both in, that you've got to be on at any moment. That phone's going to ring, that email is going to come in, that customer's going to show. And at that moment, you can't be hoping for motivation to save you.
Well, and I think the reality is, we both of us come from a background in the car business, but the reality is sales is life. Like that, you're constantly selling, you're constantly communicating, you're constantly engaging. If you're going to give somebody your time or your money or your effort or all those things. I love this. I got to show this one too. This is a sidetrack, but Donna, I think this is spot on. She says, moving snow decked out in suits. I loved it. The automotive industry is the only industry in the world that everybody's decked out in suits and ties and maybe heels, right? But they're like, well, here we go, right? It's the only one in the world, but it's so fun. So if you would, can you share with me? You brought up MTM, and I put that in the notes, and I'll put that in the show notes too. Metrics that matter. So what are 3, 4, 5 of the key things that you measure, that you look at right now, that you say, hey, these are the metrics that matter. This is stuff that's going to help you move forward.
Yeah. So, I think in any sales, you're going to identify at the lowest level, right? Or a highest, however you want to look at it. Like the first thing we're going to look at is what we can actually control. So I would always say, hey, you can't control who's coming in here, but you can control who you set an appointment with. So now let's back that up. All right. So I set an appointment. How did I get the appointment? Well, I always had at a bare minimum 30, 30, 30, which was 30 calls, 30 emails, 30 texts every single day, should produce 2 appointments. But then once the person was with us for a period of time, we would actually take the real data and we would input it. And I had a sales projection. I called it SPP, sold pace projected, and even back it out even further. We had goal, plan, accountability. So we would set the goal, have a very defined plan. And then I was relentless on accountability. I think you can run any business off of just accountability. But if I went ahead and put the goal in there, it got a little bit nicer. If I put a plan in there, it got a lot easier. And then the accountability would fall into play. So the accountability was to these metrics that mattered, that we had proven year after year after year after year that they actually worked. So once you'd been with us a certain period of time, I'd usually say 90 days up to 9 years, it didn't matter. We would look at the data and say, okay, when you make X number of calls, when you make this many emails, when you send this many texts, it equates to so many appointments or a appointment. And then over time, I actually went back even further. I said, look, I don't care how many appointments you set. I figured out when the movie Moneyball came out, I got on this insane, I kind of fall down what my wife calls rabbit holes, and the whole world disappears and I just go down it. And I spent almost 2 years defining what, and I think you'll probably like this and understand it, defining what was the Moneyball factor, the one thing that mattered the most. And the one thing that defined the most successful car salesman was how many activities does it take, whether it's phone calls, emails, texts, to get a customer to show up on the lot. So again, I didn't care about appointments anymore. I didn't care how many it took you, just as long as you knew that number. For those who unfortunately, with lack of better terms, were weak at what they did, it could be 1 out of 80. And so they would have to make 80. And as you can imagine, sometimes it took people 80 attempts. It could take them 2 or 3 days to make 80 attempts. You get a Sunday in there, you get a day off in there. All of a sudden, it's 5 days to get one person to show. Of course, that person's not going to be very good. I had multiple gentlemen, ladies that worked for me that would do it in that 1 out of 12, 1 out of 13. That meant every single day they could come to work and successfully get somebody to show up. And we all know that somebody who shows closes at about 60 to 70%. Boy, your ratios go way up. The attitude goes way up. If you want to talk about motivation, boy, that's a motivating factor, right? If there is something that's motivating, it's knowing that your job was within your control and it wasn't dictated by fate. Like, just sitting around, I always would say, hoping, a wishing, a wanting, a dreaming. No, we're not interested in that. We were interested in coming to work, knowing what it took to be successful, and then doing those things. And that in turn resulted in a successful salesperson, which resulted in somebody staying with me for a long time, which resulted in me not having to train brand new people all the time. I mean, it resulted in my customer satisfaction going through the roof, people coming back to us on repeat and referrals. So I had really defined it down to, what does it take, that Moneyball factor? How many attempts, whether email, phone call, text, in order to get a person to show up on your lot, and then using that number as something that we would define their entire, sales projection off of. So I really broke it down to a science.
Dude, I love that. I absolutely, when you said I could connect with it, spot on. I love it. I absolutely love it. And, because I always try to look for what are tangible things that we can give people that are listening to the show. They're either in leadership or coming into leadership. And when you're saying, like, you've got to measure these activities, I think that transcends all industry too. Like, we're talking from an automotive background, but it does not matter what industry in. If you're in coaching, if you're a YouTuber, I saw Leadership with Mike. He's a buddy of mine, came in and threw a little wave up earlier. He's in here watching. He watches often. If you're on YouTube, you got to look at the measurement. You got to look at the metrics. If you are at a running a grocery store, right? What are the things that are going to make that successful? So I think that is such a powerful statement, because I'm always looking for, like, well, what's the 1, 2, 3, Jonathan? And you're like, no. Let me give you the one. Let me give you the one thing. Control the activities, manage the activities. You brought up and you said accountability. And I think accountability is tremendously important when it comes to leadership, both the leader holding their people accountable, but also people in reciprocating and holding their leadership accountable. How do you measure accountability?
So again, I would put it into, data, but I also believe that it was in your actions and just an everyday case. And I know, some people don't necessarily believe in this. I don't sleep much. So, I wake up between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning. I know that's not for everybody. I hear it all the time. That's not for me, and that's fine. But I have things that I hold myself to an extremely high, standard. And I think that, accountability to yourself, to your family, to God, are critical. And, when, I guess you could probably put that in a little bit different order. God comes first, right? My family, myself. And so, I really do believe that in, the time when nobody else is looking, when, it's time to have that integrity, that's when you are the most accountable. If somebody is having to hold you accountable, well, let's just be honest, that is going to flee. I always said I'm going to be you're the best boss you've ever had, or the absolute worst. Because if I have to hold you accountable, trust me, I have no problem doing it. And I actually probably enjoy it, making sure that you're doing everything that you're supposed to. You may not.
Sure.
And so those who, would latch on and go, oh, I get it. I can hold my own self accountable. I can, wake up in the morning and make sure I'm prepared, whether you're in at 9 or noon. I don't care what time you wake up, just as long as you give yourself enough time to prepare your mind and to set everything right in your day. So when you show up, you were ready to go. But I really do believe if the home life was taken care of, if that was not in chaos, then your business life was taken care of. If your home life was in chaos, I promise you your business life is in chaos. So, being accountable really just, it goes all bounds, right? And I'll go back to it's really being disciplined. And so if you can find that discipline, you find the passion, it's really easy to start getting disciplined in those things. You start seeing success, that drives the discipline, because you're like, oh no, these things work, I'll keep doing them. And then over time, they become habitual, and it becomes a lot easier. But accountability, like I said, I think it's huge. And, whether it's, I write notes all the time. I'm still one of those guys that writes out his task list and his calendar, even though everything's digital and I use it digitally. I write everything out because it creates a mental inscription. So, I'm every day writing down, everything from push-ups to, you name it, at the many times I say gratitude or prayers or you name it. I put these things down on my little note cards, and I write them out, and probably drove many people crazy with my little 3x5 cards, because I think that's how we all learned it, when we were in third grade, and I still think we learned that way today. So.
I love that. I do the same thing. I mean, even as we're sitting talking right now, I'm sitting here with a sheet of paper and a pen, and I share many, many times on my show. I learn as much from my guests as I hope that our audience learns, because you sit and share this stuff that is sometimes it ends up, for example, we'll be talking and you or I'll go, oh, well, yeah, that seems natural. That seems basic, like accountability. That's important. But until you hear somebody say it from the outside, you go, oh man, it is simple, but it's not always easy. Right.
Yep.
And so we get into this space, especially in leadership, right? In leadership roles, it seems like often there's a lot of buzzwords. It's just like in the automotive industry, there's buzzword. In any industry, there's buzzwords that get attached to stuff. But in leadership specifically, when we're talking about leading and managing and impacting other people, there's specific buzzwords and things that people bring up. And one of the things that you brought up earlier, I'm going to go back in time to the beginning of the show. And speaking of this, while we're talking about the show, if you have not already, please do me a favor, whichever platform you're watching us from, throw some thumbs up on here, because you have got, I know you're getting value out of this. It's awesome. Like, this is a great conversation. So throw some thumbs up, share this show. If you would, share it on your timeline or share it with somebody that you think could need to hear this message. So Jonathan, let me ask you, because you brought up and you said it's important. You talked about being a wrestler to stay with it. And you mentioned patience. And then you quickly moved past patience, because you said some may say that patience is a weakness of yours. Well, so yes. Why do you say that?
Because I believe that, like, again, maybe from that accountability side, I was laughing with a guy the other day, and I said, I would give him a task, and I said, I'd come back, a couple hours or maybe a day later and follow up with you. He goes, 10 minutes later, you'd come back. So, I mean, I don't think I necessarily demonstrated enough patience. I didn't wait around for things to happen as much as I wanted to make them happen. So I think that was probably always something that I could work on. My wife is an introvert. I'm an extrovert. So she always says, you need to be more patient. I think introverts personality-wise are a little bit more that way. But I think there's a happy middle. I don't think, depending on what you're doing, you should be patient. Hey, if there's a three alarm fire, I mean, I'm not going to be patient, right? I'm going to go running out of the building, right? And if it's a brush fire up in the hills, maybe I take my time and, watch it and pay attention a little closer to where it's going, instead of just running out with my hair on fire. So it really does depend on the situation. So why I say that is because when I get into situations where I should be patient, I'm very aware that it's like eating me up inside. It's not something that is natural for me to just sit down and wait. I have to coax. I mean, I remember waiting that 6.5 hours. I counted, I read every MSRP on the showroom. I counted the tiles in the ceiling. I mean, it was crazy, the things I was doing to remain patient. And so it's very conscious of having to do that. So that's probably why it's just not something that's easy for me to do.
No, and that's fair. I think the reason I asked you to point that out, and I think that's actually a strength. I used to have a mentor. I had a GM in the car business years and years ago. And I remember him saying to me, he said, you have to be aware, Mike, that your weaknesses are just your strengths in excess. Exactly. And so one of the things that we have to look at, like patience or even impatience, as you're talking, can certainly be a strength, right? Patience is just the ability to wait and, I guess, sort of tolerate the delay without getting upset or frustrated. I don't want to use the word impatience, right? But there's a fine line for anybody who's listening. There is a fine line between patience and complacency.
Ooh, very good. I believe I can be very patient. That's a great way to say it. I believe I can be very patient in waiting for the result of a goal to come to fruition. I can, as long as the plan is clear and defined and we're working towards it. So if there was a goal that, Mike, when we started John Elway Chrysler Jeep, it was brand new dealership, didn't exist. and I wanted to sell 300 cars out of that place, and we were selling, the first month we sold 40. So we had a
Sure.
long way to go, and I remember we went on a run where I had to take them out to dinner every time we broke a record, and I took those guys out to dinner
Oh, I
every
take
month
that
for
bet every day of the
yeah, I
week.
mean, it was crazy. For like years, we did that. Like we got thrown out of every restaurant in Greeley. And they were like, "All right, guys, we've had enough of you." So it's funny to think, but I was very patient, to get to that goal of 300, and I'll never forget hitting it. But it took years to get there. So there was patience to get there, as
Hmm.
long as there was progress in the patience. So
Love that.
I love that you said that, that fine line of complacency. Complacency scares me to death, right? I
Yeah.
believe, the minute you become complacent, the world's just going to run past you and run you over.
Yeah.
We've watched, as the internet, we were talking before about how, the car business is still behind in times. And
Hmm.
I've literally watched as every retail industry has changed and as we didn't. And so I'll never forget when I took the dealership out of the newspaper, and my advertising lady, like, she just went, her hair was on fire. She couldn't
Lost her
believe I was
mind.
gonna.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she couldn't believe we were gonna do this. And I said, "Don't worry, I'm gonna use this little thing called the internet, and we'll be fine. Don't worry." And yes, it worked out really well. And the crazy thing is that was such a bold move. And constantly when I would go into social media, and I know because you're very big in the digital marketing and you get it, and it's a very it's a catchphrase now. Everybody's digital marketing, right? But
Right.
gosh, 10 years ago, I mean, it was to have a budget in digital marketing. People didn't understand that. So if we were complacent, that would have ran right past us. And
Yeah.
if we were patient and waiting for digital marketing to catch up, then we would have been behind on the times instead of ahead of them. And so I really did believe that. I always wanted to be at the forefront. I didn't need to be the first adopter, but I wanted to be, close to that second adopter, or, right there towards the beginning of it. I didn't want to be at the end of it. So that scares me
I,
to death still to this day.
I love that. I mean, I'm okay being the first adopter. Trust me, I've tripped and failed forward many, many times. So
Yeah.
while we're on this patience and complacency, Austin brings up, he says, man, complacency kills. Absolutely true. I think patience is taking the necessary actions and then being able to, tolerate what's happening without getting upset, but still taking it starts at the beginning. And like you, Jonathan, you're very much a man of action. Like you have to take that next action. You have to make that next right step. You have to keep moving forward. You have to be, it's like the adage, right? You're either growing or you're dying. There's no in between. You're not just
None.
sitting. Complacency. So you can have patience and still push for the outcome. I mean, I think that's something you said earlier. You were like, oh, look, I would ask somebody, and then 10 minutes later, I do the same thing. I still do that today, man.
I love it.
But
Yeah.
the complacency is asking someone and then just saying, well, gosh, I hope they did it done. And you never check back to have the accountability. You never check, you just assume, right? And what happens when you
Ooh,
assume,
make an
right?
ass out of you and me. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because I really do. I enjoy this conversation. I love the energy that you're bringing to it. I'm curious because I talk to a lot of leaders that are at the top of their game. And like you had said, hey, I've been in there 30 years and I've been a dealership owner partner, and like people could look at that, or they see where you're at now, because you even brought up, you said, hey, I recently got on LinkedIn and it's just blown up, and you've got a whole fan club here sitting out conversating with us on LinkedIn, which I think is awesome. The So from where you're sitting though, a lot of people can't see that, right? If someone says, well, I'm just getting started in leadership and I'm at the base of the mountain, right? I'm at base camp and I can see Jonathan way up there at the top of the mountain, but basically what we see directly in front of us is it's just the mountain, right? All I got is this mountain. And you and I both know, look, when I get to the top of the mountain, there's a whole other world. And then you're like, oh man, there's all these other peaks to climb. So
And a long way to fall.
yeah,
Don't forget that. Yeah.
that's true too. And when you fall fast.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind, right? So let me ask you, when from somebody who has traveled along that journey since you were 19, you brought up at the beginning where you got started. You've obviously had really good mentors, trainers along the way. You brought up John Elway. I'd love to go to dinner with Elway. That would be awesome. Like I would take that
Great
bet
guy.
every day of the week.
He's a
Um,
great.
what would you tell people are some key characteristics? What are some key traits that every leader should absolutely have and that they should be working on, whether they're in leadership right now, or they're aspiring to be in leadership, or maybe they've been in leadership for 25 or 30 years and you're going to remind them of something that they forgot?
I would tell you that I don't care what role you're in, you're a leader or you're not, right?
Okay.
Every single one of us, in our jobs today, whether we're at the bottom or at the top, we're making a decision to lead out. And so, just like when I walked into that dealership wearing a shirt and tie, well, I was showing leadership just in that. I showed leadership on. I mean, I'll never forget when the guys told me, "Oh, if you want to," I'd been in the business a little bit of time, and my wife had a girlfriend at the time had moved down, and we were having our first child, and they said, "Oh, you'll never stay married in this business," because they were all divorced. And well, it's because they were making bad decisions and they weren't good leaders. And I took that as a challenge that, it was very important for me to lead out and to show the way, regardless of what I was doing. I would also say, boy, this is a hard one, especially for the youth today. It seems like listen to others who've already been there, right? Allow them to give you the advice. And if you feel, this is probably the best advice that I ever received, and it was well over 25 years ago. He said, a good man, Dr. Green, we called him Dr. Green. It took me years to realize he really wasn't a doctor. But we
Doc,
called him
right?
Dr.
Yeah.
Green. But he said, when you get defensive, shut up, Jonathan, and listen. And I took that like, oh, okay, all right. And it was such great advice, because we will feel ourselves get defensive when somebody tells us something we don't like hearing, but that's exactly what we need to hear. And I still follow that today, is when somebody will tell me something, I feel that little rage or that anger or that upsetness come about me. I go, calm down. This is the time where I've got two of these and one of these, and you can tell I have no problem talking. So it's really important for me to shut up and listen. And man, that was some of the best advice I ever got. And that has allowed me to be a lot better leader over time, because you learn so much from those who are, your peers, from those who are mentors, and from those
Mhm.
who, work for you. And if you're always, too busy talking and not listening, or you're too busy, trying to prove everybody wrong, boy, it's there's just no room for you to grow. And like you said, we're either, progressing or regressing. And so if we're not listening and we're not allowing others to teach us, then we just can't grow. And I think, I heard on your podcast, you said leaders are readers. And
Mhm.
so, we're growing, we're learning, we're educating ourselves constantly. And the question is I realized at a young age that, I read the book, uh, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And
Yep.
that changed my life, because he said the moment between stimulus and response was our right to choose. And that was the one defining factor between us and all other mammals, all other creatures on this earth, is we were given that opportunity to choose between, like, I always kid around with guys. If I walk up to you and I slapped you, right, you've got a choice. I'm going to beat this little guy up and knock his other eye out, or I'm going to sit back and ask a question. Why did you do this? Then I could also run away. It's yours to choose what your response is going to be. And so, use that as an example, because, well, if you slapped a dog, the dog's going to run away or bite you, right? You slapped a bear, he's probably going to kill you. I mean, that bear doesn't look back at you and go, hey, what am I going to do right now? We
Right.
have that opportunity. And I think great leaders are always taking advantage of that moment. And so whether, I had detailers or my lot porters, so man, I loved those guys. They were probably closer to me than most people who worked for me, but they, really teaching and giving them the opportunity to lead. So, I think you would agree that presentation of a vehicle was so critically important, that
Mhm.
when that car was showing out on the lot, or when it was going through the detail department, if I had leaders, I didn't have to worry about how clean that car was going to be. It's because they were making the choice to do the right thing and to lead out. And so, I mean, I looked for leaders in every single department. I promoted those people. Some of them wanted to, more responsibility. Others didn't. But I thought it was really important. I think Donna had mentioned on there or commented on here. She was my receptionist, and I loved Donna because she was the first person to come in contact with people, and her amazing attitude and her leadership just shined forward. And I think it's so critical that we realize that some of the people that are up front that we typically wouldn't call leaders, or we don't give them that management title, are the best leaders within your organization, because they contact or are in
So
contact with
much.
the most people. So to me, that was I mean, it was, huge. I wanted leaders in every part of it. I want all my children to be leaders. My wife, man, I want my dog to be a leader. I think it's
No, I
critical to
think,
everyone.
well, so let me recap, because I always like to recap like what you're saying versus what I hear. And so I put it into a few things. I took 4 specific points from that. And so for anybody taking notes, I would recommend you write this down. The first thing, because I said, hey, what are those traits? What are the traits that you exude? What are the traits that you would follow? And you brought up number one, and again, I this is shorthand because I couldn't say it nearly as eloquently or effectively as you just did. Number one, you said decide to lead. Like, people have to make the decision. Like, you have to decide what place am I in? The second thing I wrote down, and I love the way you worded this, you said lead yourself, you have to show people the way, but specifically your wording was lead out, right? You got to have people that are going to choose to lead out. So they make the decision and then they're leading themselves first. And then 3 is you got to listen to people, and 4 was that constant growth and learning. I'm going to backtrack here to this listening to everyone. And I think it's so valuable. You brought up, you said, hey, sometimes the lot porters and the detailers, it is so important for leaders to listen and be that. John Maxwell has a book called The 360-Degree Leader, right? Where you can lead from any area of the organization and so forth. It's important if you are a leader and you've made it to, let's say, leadership with a title, which most of the time would be management and so forth. It is so important to still continue to listen to that 360 degrees and everybody that's around you, because the reality is those people have relationships with one another that are different from the relationship that they have with you as a leader. And when you have a solid and strong relationship with those people, like you brought up, the receptionists, the detailers, so when we're talking about even a larger organization on a larger scale, if we went into Amazon and you said, hey, these are the packers, the people packing the packages, they all have this real relationship with each other. And if you take the time to get to know them and actually listen to what it is that they're saying, a lot of times it reveals quite a bit about the deeply the way the organization is run, because that group of people, that group of followers, that group of staff will say things to each other that they would never say to you. Like, there's the elephant in the room, right? It's, oh, well, this is how it really works, but when Jonathan's here or when Mike's here, right? And so if you don't take the time to listen and establish a relationship and invest in those people, it's just going to continue. Guess what, leaders? You're the elephant in the room. You're going to be the elephant, right? So I love that you brought that up. I'm curious to know, because again, you've had a very like a career that took a lot of grit and took a lot of work to move into those roles that you had. And we always talk about the good side of mentors. What are the things that they can, pour into me? And it's easy. I actually have notes for a future show to be talking about, like, hey, what are these key things that leaders do? Because there are probably 5 or 6 that most every leader that I ask, they say, well, accountability and there's discipline and getting results as a leader. And there's a lot of things that are common. And then there's a few outliers that if you were to say them, you go, oh yeah, that's really important. You got to have that as a leader. What are some things for people that were in management roles? I'll say management roles because not everybody that's in management is a good leader. That were in management roles that you encountered in your career that you would say, these are not good traits to have, so don't do this thing. What are 2 or 3 things that you would say are not good for leaders to have?
Well, I'll say this. I always do believe, like, if somebody isn't a people person, the worst thing in the world you can do is put somebody in a role to lead people that doesn't like people. They don't like, human beings. They, you a lot of times we'll find out that somebody likes things or they like people. And so identifying that, you can be an engineer and still like people. You can be an engineer and dislike people. And just because you're a good engineer does not mean you're going to be a good leader. Just because you've been in a role and had longevity and been there for a while doesn't mean you're the right person for that next job or that next role. So it was critical that you like humans, that you really have to be interested in them. And I, really do believe that, the human being is an amazing creature. I think in my career, I've been counting for years now, and over 44,000 human beings. And I am creating one of the greatest anthropology studies that I think is known to man. And it is amazing to me at what, how lots of people fall into different silos, but then there are those outliers. There are those human beings that are a little bit different, that do things that catch your attention and, make you go, oh wow, that's different, I haven't seen that before. They're very unique. So if you have somebody that doesn't care for that, right? Oh, that's dangerous. That's really dangerous. The
Sure.
second thing is when we talk about accountability, I mean, I'm huge on accountability, but at the same token, what are you holding them accountable to? I hate the person that puts in rules and laws that are there for an authoritarian idea, are there to make you follow the rules that really just don't make any sense. They don't benefit anybody other than to put yourself in a position of power. And so, that is just a big, huge stumbling block. If people aren't willing to follow you, you're not a leader, right? And the last thing I would probably say, and one of the greatest things I learned about Julius Caesar is in his autobiography. He talks about early on in his career as as a new general. I can't remember where he was about, but they were charging some area, and he got out, and also the next thing he knew, he was way ahead of his men, and he looked up in the air, and there were all these arrows that were coming down upon him, and he describes it, and like as you're hearing him describe it, still to this day, it gives me chills. He literally says, he goes, "I'm done. It's over." And next thing you knew, all these shields came around and covered him and blocked him. And now we have this great man who we were able to study and to learn, and all the things later on in his life that he did. And it was all because his people like believed in him. Not only did they believe in him, but they were willing to risk their life for him. So if you can't get people to follow you, if they're not willing to go where you're going, you're in trouble. And I would probably say they're probably not willing to go where you're willing or you want to go, because you won't go there. I
Mm,
always think that the example, you have to set the example. And, if you're expecting them to be here, I'm sorry, you better come in here. You better be higher and lead out, like I always say, at a level that is, sometimes inhuman. You want to show them in a direction, in a way that they go, wow, that's amazing. And a lot of times, like I said, we'll get leaders in there that set rules that don't make any sense, and force
sure.
people through an authoritarian. So I'm the boss, and they've got to follow them, and everybody's going, this doesn't make any sense. They won't follow you, down the path that you're going. You don't like human beings. I don't know how many people I ran into that I mean, I would just shake my head and go, what do you mean you don't like humans? Then why are you leading them?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you can't do a job really well, man. I had lots of technicians that I love to death that would just flat out tell you, I want to work on a car. I don't want to deal with a human. That's fine.
Yeah.
So it really just goes in. If we put those people into leadership roles, we're just setting them up to fail. But again, they could be a great leader as a mechanic. However, they're not the person to teach the apprentice. They're not the person to to be talking to the customer, if there's an issue and a problem. So you have to be very aware of that and understand who it is that you're working with, and how they think. And so yeah, it's our job as a leader to understand, how to put the right leaders in. When I
Absolutely.
think the name of your podcast, the Leadership Toolkit. I always hate that people are like, oh, leaders are born. No, they're not. It is a toolkit. It's my box I pick up every day, and all the tools that I put into it to go to work.
Mhm.
And sometimes I take some of them out and I use them, and other times I throw certain ones away, and I'm putting new ones in all the time. And so, when I saw that, the Leadership Toolkit, that was what really drew my attention. Is like, you get it, you understand that it's nothing
Thank you.
innate, it's nothing you're born with, it's something that you develop over a long period of time. So, and
Absolutely.
people have to be willing to do that.
Well, and I think that yeah, when it comes to the leadership toolkit, one, thank you for the compliment. And I agree, it's one of those, we hear it say, yeah, leaders are born, and it's like, no, the best leaders are the ones, they may have some ability towards some specific characteristics, but they're the ones that are deliberate in making themselves. And
Yep.
it's in the and that are deliberate in making others. I think you said it here beautifully just a moment ago, when you, like, as the leader, you have to be a leader of leaders, of other leaders, and you have to know your people so well that you're not putting them in a position to fail. I have a good friend who's been on the podcast a few times, Ian, uh and he said it's so funny, because when you said not a people person, he said that, he goes, how can you like lead people but not like people? And I'd never heard it said
Yeah.
until the, and I'm like, because and that's his big thing, is team building and talking about people. And I'm curious, because one of the things you brought up, and I mean, well, gosh, we could go on for a full on seminar the way we're having a conversation. I think what you're bringing is great, and I so appreciate it, Jonathan. um one of the things you brought up was, team building, and we've talked a lot about individuals and sort of leadership roles. Can you think of a time, how do you handle it? Because in the car business, we have ups and downs, right? And in any business, we want to have all ups, right? We want to go peak to peak. We
Yes.
want to move to the positive. But the reality is there are some times that are downs that we look at as fails, as losses, as whatever you want to word it. There, for the longest time when I was a younger leader, I said, I don't look at failures, right? You just have successes. Like if I was pushing to sell 16 cars and I sold 10, I still succeeded in selling 10. And it's like, yeah, that can be a good way to look at it. However, as I've gotten, I'd like to think, as I've definitely gotten older, and I'd like to think wiser, that we do have failures sometimes. There's
Oh
stuff
yeah.
where we just flat miss the mark. And so, can you think of a time with all your background in, sales and in leadership, that that either you failed or your team failed, and how do you coach them through that? How do you approach that, and how do you help them stay calm and moving forward as a team?
Well, I think like you said, experience is key, and I've noticed that in the last. That's why being able to consult and help businesses now today has
Mhm.
been very effective because I have all the years of going through the ups and downs, like the internet bubble, gas at $4, the '08 crisis, all these different things that happened, and we have a lot of leaders today or managers today that got in the business in 2013 or they've been doing it. What I find a lot is we have somebody who's a good salesperson, moves into a good manager, and then one day all of a sudden we're said, hey, here's a multi-million-dollar business, good luck. Or they were, I've got roofers, I've got insurance, I've got solar, all different types of sales types of industries where that
Sure.
person moved up and now own their own business. And what happens is they find themselves in a role, in a situation where they've never been there before, and they don't have the experience, they don't have the education. And so it's really important that when we're going through the difficult times, I can say, well, yeah, I've been through difficult times, but really all a failure does is tell me I'm one step closer to success. If you always thought you were going to be successful, then everybody would do it. If this was just easy, then why doesn't everybody do it? And then if it was just easy, boy, let me tell you, it wouldn't pay well. I don't have to convince anybody to buy anything at Walmart. They show up every day and buy. So I mean, it doesn't pay well. It's just that simple. So the fact that I have to actually fail and be able to make it through the failure is what makes me successful. I would always, the first thing I would do when I bring somebody in is I would teach them about the word no. Okay. The word no is taught to us, and I think you'll agree it's the first word we learn. All my kids learn no before they learn dad, before they learn anything. And our whole life, it has this negative connotation. And then all of a sudden, one day, we're supposed to take it and say, hey, it means something good. So what I would do is I would set them up and I'd bring them in. I like to bring in, it had to be at least 4 or 5 people, but I like groups of, 10, 12, 15. The bigger group, the better. And anytime I'd come into a new dealership, or I would always do this. And when I would do it, I'd separate the room and I'd take half of them in one room and the other half in the other. And the first half, I would ask the question, what does it look like when somebody is lying to you? And they would write down all their answers. And I'd go to the next group and I'd say, what does it look like when somebody's inexperienced, scared, right? When they're, nervous, what does that look like? And they'd write down all their answers. Then I bring both of the groups back together and I'd have them put it on the board. And it was I've yet to ever see this not work. I've done it for years and years, and I don't know how many groups. The
Okay.
answers are identical. And what people don't understand is that when we are nervous, when we are scared, it looks like we're lying. If somebody is intentionally lying to us, I always say to Bernie, I say Bernie Madoff, and people nowadays are like, who's Bernie Madoff? How do you not know
Right.
what Bernie Madoff? But literally, Bernie Madoff didn't look like he was lying. He was a con man, or a con artist, right? Is called the word con is from the word confidence. They were called confidence men. So they don't look like they're lying. And so literally, if failure creates nervousness and anxiety and anxiousness, the consumer no longer thinks or doesn't even look at you like like you're nervous. They look at you as a liar, and your failure rate
Wow.
goes off the cliff. So if you thought you were failing before, just think about failing and failing, and guess what? You'll fail more. So it becomes this cycle. So the idea was, listen, we are going to learn how to deal with failure far better than we're going to learn how to deal with success. I mean, have you ever, Mike, you ever met somebody that didn't like dealing with success? Who didn't like, I wrestled and I got my hand raised, when your daughter
Right.
does a great job and gets a great score in gymnastics, right? She's
Bam.
all excited. Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem. Right? We're all excited. When my daughter wins a soccer game or scores a goal, we're all excited. But you know what? It's not about the success. Everybody can deal with success. How are you going to deal with failure? And so literally my entire career has been teaching people how to deal with failure, because I really do believe that. I love when, like, times right now when I rub my hands together when the interest rates went through the roof. I went, oh, it's going to get difficult. You know what? That means most people are going to fail and not know how to deal with it. And since we do, we will succeed. And we had more success in the slow months, which I didn't believe in the tough times, which I didn't believe in, because failure comes constantly. It's a matter of how you deal with it. And if you dealt with it like a professional, you were just one step closer to success. And like I said, everyone can deal with success. It's just a matter of how you deal with failure.
Yeah, everybody likes to win. I think that's a really good statement. Everybody can deal with success. It's a matter of how you deal with failure. And I think that is, just speaking frankly, and not to get way off on a tangent here, but that's one of the things that we struggled with was that, and you'll appreciate this when I say it, right? When everybody got a participation trophy, it's like, no, no, you
Terrible.
can't do that. Like, you got to learn to win and lose. I remember my oldest son, when he was probably about, I don't know, 9 or 10. And he was so frustrated. He played hockey and he was always playing up a division because he was a good hockey player. And he got frustrated one time and he says, when am I ever going to score a goal? Because he just hadn't, like, he had scored one or two and he'd been playing for several years and he was just so frustrated. Well, then all of a sudden, probably a year later, 2 years later, it clicks. And then he was, I think, 10, 11 years old, playing with 13 to 15-year-old kids, scoring half a dozen goals a game. And we're having to call him off because it's like, okay, when you experience that failure, you have to look at it and say, well, what? And he was saying it in his expiration, when am I ever going to score a goal? But if you repeat that to yourself without the emotion behind it, like, when am I going to score a goal? Then you ask the next question, how am I going to score a goal? Right? When we talk about it in business and in life, right? When am I going to make a sale? How am I going to make a sale? What was it that worked or didn't work on this sale that didn't take place? When you start asking the next question and the next question and the next question, that's how you get stronger. It's like going to the gym every day, right? Uh, or every once a month, right? you,
Yeah,
you,
that's a
you
huge
go to the
difference.
gym one time and you go, man, this sucks, right? But when you start to go and you continue to go, you start to experience the joy that comes with it, the fact that you're growing and that you're feeling better and feeling better about yourself and so on and so forth. So I think that's really, really strong to share, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Do me a favor. We're coming right up on an hour. I would love to have you on the show again in the future if that's something. We'll share
Love it.
what's
A lot
the
of
what's
fun.
the next steps and stuff. Any final thoughts, sort of, to take us out on today's show?
Well, I think, as we just talked about that failure piece, I think it's really critical that people do understand that, life is about failure. Life is about, struggle and pain. And as anything, when we talked about, going to the gym, it's about the breaking a muscle down and tearing it apart that makes it stronger. And so, if in fact you're looking at life to be this nice, hunky dory, simple, easy, plan, then expect life not to give you much. Expect it to be full of nothing. Whereas if you're willing to take the risk and to push and to rip the mental, I think your brain has
Mm-hmm.
these mental muscles, and if you're willing to tear those fibers apart, if you're willing to push yourself outside of that, that little world that you're in, if you're willing to take something that's really complex and learn how to break it down to its simplest form, then that's where you're going to find success. I watched all my children as they go through college and as they struggle, and they call me up, Dad, it's so hard, it's so hard. I go, oh, good, I love it. And I know they hate that response. They want me to just, give into it, or my daughter's struggling with soccer or whatever it is. But I really do believe that in the struggle is where we find our success. And, if it was easy, everybody would do it. And if it is easy, you don't want to do it. And granted, hey, there's a lot of, people, they say, climbing to Mount Everest. I think you mentioned that earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of very successful people that are buried dead on Mount Everest. And people like, well, yeah, then why try? You could literally be buried dead on Mount Everest. I go, exactly. Sounds like a good place to be buried. I don't know about you, but hey, I climbed Mount Everest, or at least I was going for it. So
Going
I
for the
don't
attempt.
see failure. I don't see the fact of pushing yourself outside your bounds and your capability a bad thing. I really do think that everybody should wake up every single day. I learned how to wake up at between 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the morning by taking daylight savings. And I'd wake up, not this one, the last one's the tough one. It's the,
Yeah.
the fall one that we fall back. And I would take 15 minutes, and I did it for years until I was able to wake up at 3:30. And now I just do it naturally, right? But that was difficult. It wasn't easy. What do people love? They love their sleep. I look at them and go, man, I just see that as a big waste of time. I don't know why. I hate the night and I love the mornings. So I think if you find those things that are, difficult for you, and you'll know them, right? And you run
Mhm.
towards them, don't run away. And every one of us has something different. Somebody might be better at one thing than you, and you go after that, and they can't go after what you can, so they don't. Well, guess what? You're going to be the winner. And so you literally are looking for the things that are difficult. You're looking for those things that push you. You're looking for the things that are hard. And, relationships are difficult. Boy, being married, I kid around about this, but, we were high school sweethearts, but more like high school sweet tarts. It's a bittersweet love. You're really trying every day to make that work. Raising children. Oh, you want to talk about,
Oh man.
one of the most difficult things in the world, staying committed to God, making sure that he's a part of your life, showing gratitude and love and kindness and appreciation for everyone, is from the person. I always say, you have a moment, right? When I'm standing in
Mhm.
line at the grocery store, I don't like the self checkout because I want to talk to the person in front of me and behind me. I want to talk to the person checking me out. I want to make every single moment impactful. I want to make somebody smile. I want to make them laugh. I kid around with my eye all the time. I always go up to little kids and ask them if they've ever met a pirate. They're like scared to death and then start laughing. And I just think that we create moments or memories with emotion. And if you're that person who's willing to go outside your comfort zone and create those moments, boy, you think it does something for that person. Imagine,
Yeah.
you can begin to see what it does for you. So I really do think if people, look at their life like that, this is, who cares about the bigger world? And I think we all get caught up in that. And I don't watch the
Yeah.
news. I don't pay any attention to it. I don't really care. I don't pay attention to politics. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my life. Yes, we could get into what I agree and don't agree with, but let's just be honest. I'm going to find success in the tough times and in the good times, and I would prefer the tough ones. So if my president makes it tougher on me, then you know what? I'm going to be stronger. If my president makes it easier on me, well, then it's easier for everybody. So really, I don't get into that nonsense, and I don't want to fall into the outer world as much as I do my inner world. And the person who's standing in front of me, if I can impact them, if you can take the moment to impact that person, then you've changed your life. Forget about them for a second. Go ahead and be selfish. Change your life, and have a heck of a lot better day. So I could go
So
on all
good.
day long, Mike. I love it, man. I really
I
appreciate
I
this.
love it. No, I
You got a great
really,
podcast.
I really enjoy what you've taken the time to share. I thank you so much. Jonathan, thank you for joining me today. As a reminder for everybody, and please, please, I know that you've had anybody who's listened in to even 5 minutes of this show. I know that you've gained some wisdom from it. I know you've gained some insight. You've gotten some motivation, even if temporary, right? But remember the discipline. I will tell you, please share it out. Throw a thumbs up on it. I'll remind you one last time to connect with Jonathan. You can search Jonathan Lampros there on LinkedIn. He said he's the only one. Connect with him. You can get stuff like this every day. And then certainly you could text Jonathan at 303-995-0421. So Jonathan, thank you so much for investing your time and sharing your time with the audience with me today. I got a ton of great notes and a ton of great insight myself. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you for being a leader and leading out for all of us. We're talking about this before. You've done it since 09. You're doing it before we even could spell podcast. So I love it.
Yeah.
And it makes a huge impact. I know multiple people's lives. So I'm thankful that you decided to be a leader.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Hang out for just a minute in the green room, as you will, and I'll take us out. All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody, that is going to bring us to a close for another Leadership Toolkit podcast. Thank you so much. And genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, I know you have to have gained something from this episode. Please share the episode out and make sure, if you know of another great leader from any industry, have them connect with me. I would love to interview them and share their wins and share their losses and share their wisdom on the show, because I think that's how we all learn. And this is a way that you can impact your own life. You can stay teachable, you can keep learning, and you can grow as a leader, and that will allow you to grow the people around you. So thank you so much for joining me for another Leadership Toolkit. I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, 12:05 Mountain Time. And until we speak next, stay great, everybody. We'll talk soon.